can turn the transcript off because I know what I'm saying. I don't need to see it typed. We have a guest with us this evening. Mr. Johnson is going to be here to give you a little bit about him. You are a certified financial planner, right? Am I saying that right?
We're accredited asset managing specialist is my
There you go. See, I knew you had one of them fancy highfalutin titles.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, he's a guy that specializes in helping folks invest money. Is that a fair statement?
Very, very much so. Yeah.
Okay. And you know, y'all, you've been in classes with me and been in enough sessions with me to know that I'm always going to lead you down what I believe to be a path of truth. And I would never bring anybody into the class that I didn't trust. And I say that to say this. Dustin is the say that title again.
Accredited asset managing specialist.
There you go. I always want to say certified financial planner.
Sure. Other designations.
But anyway, Dustin is the person that helps Miss Gwen and I with managing our finances. I have my, we've talked in this class, we've talked about the need for retirement funds and different assets, and tonight we're going to get into that a little more in depth. But Mr. Johnson here is the guy that I turn to because I don't know the stock market. I don't want to know the stock market or any of those other markets, whether it's the stock market or whether it's all of them asset things that he does. Okay, that's not me. Okay, kind of like I told you guys, those of you that have been in my accounting class, I'm not an accountant. It's what I for him to take care of Miss Gwen and I and make sure that our finances are in an order so that here in a few years when the good Lord says, okay, David, it's time for you to stop teaching and just sit at home and drink iced tea on the front porch in the rocking chair, that I'm in a position where financially I can do that. So all that to say, welcome, Dustin. We appreciate you being with us. Now, one of the things that he told me when I asked him if he could be here was that because of regulations that he has in his industry, he would not be able to actually do a presentation for us this evening because he would have to get all that cleared through your legal folks and your compliance folks and all of that kind of stuff. But he did say that he would be more than happy to be here and correct anything that I might say wrong. And trust me, I know that this is not my area of specialty, so I may get some of this. I'll get close, but I may get some of it a little bit off. And if I say something that's not quite right, please jump in and correct me. But at the same time, I was hoping a few of you would be on this evening so you could ask questions. But I've got a few questions that I kind of had written out to be able to ask at the end so that we can have a little bit of question and answer at the end. Okay. That said, I'm now going to see if I can make this technology work for me today. It does not always want to, as you guys well know. So Dustin, can you see my slide?
I sure can.
Okay. Now, let me go one more step here. Okay, you can still see my slide. You see the full slide. You don't see the slide note.
No, I see the full slide.
I'm going to. We're going to come back and talk about the cost of college in a little bit because with Dustin here, I want to get into the investment a portion of this section up front so we can have this discussion, and then Dustin can go on about being with his family and stuff this evening. So I've got investing for retirement slash wealth accumulation. And the reason why I put it that way is this. I know most of you guys are young enough that the idea of saving for retirement is just, it's foreign to you, okay? It's kind of like you guys all think you're invincible and you're never going to die. But again, we all know that's not true. But the idea of saving for retirement is something that for most folks your age is it's a foreign concept. So if we think about it as, instead of saving for retirement or investing for retirement, we're going to do it for wealth accumulation. The reality is it's the same stinking thing. It's just a matter of, when are you going to use the money? If you're doing it for wealth accumulation, you may use the money prior to retirement. So we're going to talk about it in a couple of different aspects. When you're in your 20s, like I said, retirement just kind of just seems like it's an awful far away, and it's a concept that just doesn't work for you guys. But anyone nearing retirement, and I'm going to put 2 hands up because I'm getting there. Actually, you guys have all heard me talk. I've actually retired 3 times. No, yeah, I've retired 3 times, but I'm on my all the time. So, you know, the closer you get to retirement, the more you need to make sure you've got that nest egg built. So the concept that we're going to talk about tonight is why it makes more sense to start early investing your money than it does waiting until later. And I've got a couple of different examples that we're going to talk about tonight. The reality is, a lot of folks your age, they start looking at the fact that, well, I don't make enough money to save money. And what I would tell you is, and we've talked about this in a couple of the classes, if you have a bunch of debt out there and you've got debt looming over your head, the chances are your debt's going to be higher in interest than money that you're making in savings. But as we discussed, you need to make sure you have that emergency fund set aside. Depending on who you are and what your expenses are, somewhere between 3 and 6 months worth of ready cash, emergency money that you can get to should you find yourself in a situation where you need that money. A lot of times what happens, as I recall best, it still happens today, but that emergency money for me a lot of times ends up being car repair. It's something that wasn't budgeted. But all of a sudden now I've got to do something, you know, to repair the car. And so the money will come out of the emergency funds, but then I try to make sure that I put the money back in it as quickly as possible so that it's there. I'm kind of rambling tonight, and I apologize for that. Not sure why this is probably just because it's a subject that I'm not a subject matter expert on, and so trying to teach it becomes an issue for me. Okay. Small amount of retirement at an early age becomes huge. And like I said, we're going to get into a couple of examples here in a little bit, talking about compounding interest and how compounding interest makes such a big deal. But the key takeaways that I want you guys to get from what we're talking about tonight is that it's easier to save for retirement when you're young and you don't have as many responsibilities. A lot of times, many of you are not married, and it's much easier to establish the habit of saving now. A few of you are married. I got that. And but maybe you're married and don't have any children yet. I'm trying to think. I'm trying to run the class roster in my head. I don't think any of you guys have kids yet, but I may be wrong on that. But the bottom line is that when you're younger, many times the responsibilities aren't as high, or aren't as many. And if you can begin to learn to save money early, it's something that will benefit you in the long run. It's also a whole lot easier to map out a retirement plan when you're younger. You don't have to know for sure when you're going to retire, but and Dustin, you can chime in here a little bit if you want.
Yeah.
But having an investment advisor can help you set your priorities and goals. So kind of describe for me, if you would, Dustin, what it is that that financial advisor does.
Well, I mean, ultimately, we try to take a, kind of a full scope on somebody's income versus their expenses, their debt, and ultimately trying to work on being able to compromise to be able to work into all those different buckets. So especially for like my younger clients, what I often find is that there's a huge challenge because we have either debt from vehicles, homes, college.
School loans.
Yeah, and so so one of the big things that I'm always trying to analyze when I'm working with my younger folks is that what is the interest rate? Because what we have to be able to determine is ultimately are putting money aside, saving, is that actually hurting us because we're actually paying more in interest, trying to fill those buckets. So there's a lot of times where I will encourage people is to kind of build a plan and say, okay, this is the amount of money that you have coming in income wise. This is really what we need to assign to try to pay off whatever the debt scenario is, over a course of a year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever that looks like. And then really try to tackle the like credit cards and things that have the highest interest first, and then kind of work your way down. So there's what we call as good debt and there's bad debt. Good debt is actually, say, a mortgage payment. A mortgage, not only, especially like in today's world with interest rates being so low, it also helps build your credit. And credit is what's going to escalate, someone to be able to expand, to be able to buy other things. And so that's one thing I see with a lot of younger people is that they miss their payment on their cell phone bill, they miss payments on their credit cards, things, or even their vehicle. And what it does is it continues to drive down their credit score, and then it makes it harder to dig out. So I guess maybe in a nutshell, that's really what I do. So I try to map out a general plan to be able to get to the point to really being able to save. But like you said, the number one takeaway here is really once you can be at a position to save is really to build that emergency bucket up 3 to 6 months of whatever your monthly expenses are. So that way you have something to be able to dig into, and you're not having to leverage and borrow additional money to try to maintain and to be able to move forward.
Thank you. I touched on it for a second. I'm going to mention it again, but again, we'll get into it a little bit more in detail and as we get into some of the other slides. But compounding interest is interest that we earn, where when we invest money and we get an interest payment back for having invested money. And then over the next period of time, even if we don't invest any additional money, that money that was there has earned a certain amount of money. Well, over the next period of time, the money you're going to earn is going to be even higher because you're going to get interest on the interest that you earned the first time. And each month that continues to grow and grow and grow. It's called compounding interest. And I believe I've got a good example laid out so that it makes sense. Okay. Another thing that we look at, and I didn't put it in this category in this bullet, but I'm going to add it as we're going along, is looking at different investment tools. And what I've got listed here is that, the IRAs, there's two forms of an IRA. There's a Roth IRA, which is money that you're putting into a savings account that has already been taxed, which means then when you go to take that money out in years down the road, and Dustin, correct me if I'm wrong here, but you don't pay taxes on that money as you pull it out. Is that correct?
Yep. 59 and a half years old or later. So that's the magic age. So, and as far as like contribution limits, so if you're under the age of 50 and a half, it's $6,000 per year. If you're over the age of 50 and a half, then it's 7,000 per year. Okay. So combination, it can be either all Roth IRA money, it could be all traditional IRA money. The difference being traditional IRA is pre-tax. So if somebody is looking for deductibility to be able to, not have to pay as much in taxes now, then a traditional IRA is a good form to do that. But if somebody is looking for the long haul opportunity, I think the Roth IRA is the better option, in my opinion, just because you pay the taxes up front, but not only is the principal that you've put in tax-free, but also all of the growth is tax-free as well. So,
and that's the cool part about it. As long as you don't take that money out early, when you do start taking out that money, you're not paying taxes even on the additional money that you've earned. So that's the cool part. The other piece that I didn't add onto this bullet that I probably should have is looking at investment engines related to your job, typically known as a 401k. And that's investment money that's done in relationship to your job. Usually it's a benefit with the job. A lot of times many companies will match money that you put into a 401k. I happen to be working for a state agency down here in the state of Texas. And because I'm working for a state agency, it's not a 401k because those are usually done with private entities and private agencies. Because I'm working with the state agency, it's a TRS, Texas Retirement Service. It's basically the same stinking thing. It's just a government-run 401k. That's the best way I can describe it anyway. It's the same thing. Now, I will tell you that in my case, because it is a state agency, in order to get the employment here, I had to sign documents and agree to the state forces me to retire, put money into a retirement account. A 401k, those are voluntary, you're not forced to. But the nice thing about it is that this Texas retirement savings. The nice thing about it is that the school that I'm working at matches that money dollar for dollar. So I'm putting 8% into my savings account, my retirement savings account, but so is the school that I'm working for. So, and Dustin can tell you, you start looking at 16% of your income monthly, that'll add up real quick.
It does. It does.
So that's another. So typically, and then as you get to working with a financial planner or somebody that helps you, assists you with advising you on how to move about this. There's other vehicles out there. There's mutual funds and straight up. Again, that's that's why I pay guys like Dustin.
Yeah, individual stocks, exchange traded funds. There's a lot of variances out there.
Right now, I think I wish I had bought some index stock about 20 years ago.
Yes, or Bitcoin.
Yeah, or Bitcoin. I heard an ad for Bitcoin the other day that said what was it, 1978 when Bitcoin first started, or was it?
I'm not for sure I'm not for sure on that.
It was either 78 or 88, but if you had invested $100 in Bitcoin the first month that it came out, that $100 would now be worth $480,000.
Wow.
And I'm like, man, back when it came out, I had $100. I wish I'd have done that.
Yep.
The reality, though, and Dustin will tell you that, you know, that's a quote unquote, my air quotes here, that's a get rich quick scheme that some people did make some money on quickly. Uh, so the reality is, as you're going into this, and this is one of the things that an advisor is going to do, is they're going to sit down and they're going to want to know, what are your goals? What is your intent? And at the age of 20, 25, 30, you may have the same goals that somebody like me that's 60 years old has. You just have a whole lot more time to get there than I do. Okay. Now, I'm very fortunate. I had a grandfather back when I was very young that had this same kind of conversation with me. And I started putting money away at a young age. So needless to say, Miss Gwen and I are not rich, but we're doing okay. I think we're set for success as we move forward, to be able to cover any expenses and to maintain the lifestyle that we currently have, even when we retire and that income stops coming in the door, because we'll have the money in savings in different retirement vehicles in order to draw that money out. Okay, but the bottom line is you have to map out what your goals are, and that's why an advisor is very key to doing that, because there are very few of us out there. I shouldn't have said it that way. There are very few folks out there. I can't say us because I'm not one of them, that understands that process and can do that successfully. To me, the process and what Dustin does is like walking through a minefield, and that's no fun.
Yeah. Yep. It's time in the market, not timing the market.
You hit time in, not timing, right?
Yep, exactly.
I do know this saying: buy low, sell high.
Yeah. But the true definition of high is still an unknown. Because, for example, just a couple of years ago, the Dow Jones was, right around 20,000, and where we're at today is, north of 34,000.
Yeah, it dropped almost 600 points today and still above 34,000.
Yep. Yep.
That's the reason I said I wish I'd have bought some index stock.
Yep.
And for those of you that don't know, index stock is where instead of buying a specific stock, you buy, best way to describe it, Dustin, is you buy stock in the exchange. And as the exchange goes up, you're buying a little bit of every stock, right?
Yeah, so there's three major stocks that form the US stock market. It's the Dow Jones, which represents 30 companies. There's the S&P 500, which represents 500 companies of all sectors being technology, financial, energy, utilities, etc. And then you have the NASDAQ, which is the overall probably the biggest index when it comes to individual stocks. So instead of just going out and, say, buying Apple, you could buy, like the NASDAQ or the NASDAQ 100. And not only would you have Apple, but you'd have Google and you'd have Facebook, or I guess what is known as Meta Networks now, Amazon, the list goes on. So it's a way to diversify, to be able to have your eggs in a lot of different baskets without having so much risk all in one company.
Cool. So I'm going to show you guys, this is the example that I was talking about when I was saying we would talk a little bit about compounding interest and how that works. Okay. So let's say that you invest $1,000 in a safe long-term bond and it earns 3% interest per year. Okay. Well, at the end of the first year, you're going to have earned $30. So now instead of the $1,000, you got $1,030. Okay. Well, the next year, if you don't invest any more money, you still got that same original $1,000 you put in there, but now you've got $1,000 now you got $30.90. So you've added an extra 90 cents that year because you got interest on that first $30 that you earned the year before. Each year that's going to continue to grow and grow and grow. And if you just let that money set, it's going to it will compound on top of itself and continue to grow and make you a lot more money each time it adds interest back on top of itself. Okay, you got to make sure that you're setting realistic goals and you've got all the necessary information. This should probably have been up on the previous slide, but somehow I got it on that slide. Okay, a few things that you do need to consider when you're doing your analysis and you're setting your goals. Okay, yeah, see. Somehow I split that up. This should have been up here. So let's go back to this compounding interest model here. Okay. Well, now we're at 1,000. So we had 1,030. So we added another. So now we're at $1,069. Okay. So that next year, if we didn't add any more money to it, we'd get that same 30% interest. But now instead of 90 extra cents, now we're going to get $6.09 extra instead of just 90 cents extra. You see how that money begins to grow exponentially? So let's take another example here. Okay, so we're going to take that same $1,000. We haven't invested any additional money. Okay. But we're going to fast forward to year 39. Okay. And I went to the U.S. Securities and Exchange website to get their calculator. Okay. So if these $3,167. That doesn't sound like a lot of money. Okay. But if you look at that, that's more than 300% increase over what you initially put into that bond 39 years ago. Okay. Well, and then you go forward one more year. So now instead of $3,167, now you got $3,262.04. Okay. So where we started off that very first year, the interest that we got was $30. Now the extra interest that we're getting is up to $95 a year. Does that sound like it's tracking right, Dustin?
Maybe. I think it would. I think the compounding would probably be. I don't know. I'm not here to try to challenge the the SEC.
That's, to me, that seemed like it would be low, but
yeah, I think it's more. I think it's more than that. But anyway, I mean, regardless, you should be able to. You could calculate on any compounding interest calculator. You should be able to just type in the amount of money that you're in, the principal, the amount that you're initially going to invest. At what percent is it going to compound? And you can also put in the number of years, and it should shoot it out for you. So, needless to say,
it may be that their website's right and the user messed it up.
No, needless to say, the compounding interest is really how great wealth is generated versus more of a simple interest kind of concept too, where it just continues to grow off of your original principal.
Okay, so I pulled this quote out of one of my economics books. Okay, but the miracle of compounding earnings on earnings. The miracle of compounding earnings. It made more sense when I was reading it in my economics books than it does this evening as I'm reading. The bottom line is, over time, that money builds on itself and builds on itself and builds on itself, so that now we're making 3 times as much money in year 39 and 40 as we did in year 1.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, our money is worth 3 times as much. That same $1,000 that we invested 39 years ago is now worth 3,000 and more than $3,000. So it's a 300% increase in the value of the money that we invested. Okay. So let's look at another example. Okay, saving a little early versus saving a lot later. Okay. So you may think that you got plenty of time to save for retirement. After all, you're only in your 20s, right? Your whole life looks at, man, my dyslexia is messing with me tonight. You have your whole life ahead of you, okay? And maybe that's true. But let's look at an example here, okay? If you have access to, well, and so I did talk to employee-based savings stuff here, okay? So let's say you put aside some money for outside of your employer, away from the 401k and stuff, okay? And let's say you start investing into a money market at $100 a month, okay? And again, sometimes $100 a month is tough when you're young. Okay, I know I told you guys earlier that my grandfather had me started early. Now, mind you, when I say my grandfather had me started earlier, I'm talking I was 16 years old, 15 years old, and he had me saving $25 a month. Okay. Payment to drop down on my first house. So, but anyway, $100 a month, okay, and you average a positive return of 1% a month or 12% a year. Dustin, is that realistic to look at a 12% increase per year?
I mean, yeah, I mean, the last couple of years for sure. I mean, it all depends on how much risk you want to put in on the money. Definitely not a money market, but realistically, I mean, yeah, there's a lot of sectors out there that have been
far exceeding that, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, the indexes over the last couple of years have been in the 15 to 25% range.
Okay. But again, just as an example, to use this number, I wanted to stay with this because this is again coming out of some of the training that I got when I was going through my economics classes and stuff. Okay, or my finance classes. So 1% interest a month or 12% a year. Okay, and you compound that monthly over 40 years. Okay, but you've got a friend who's the same age and doesn't begin saving until he's age 30. Now, mind you, you're age 20 and you started saving, and you got a friend that doesn't start saving until 30 years later, okay? So you got a 30-year head start on him, and he invests $1,000 a month instead of $100 a month. Now, let's say he's getting the same interest rate return, he's getting the same 12% per year, okay? But he's been doing $1,000 a month for 10 years, where you've been doing $100 a month at this point for 40 years. Okay. Now, who do you think is going to have the most money? Come on, Victoria, you got to answer this one.
The guy who started earlier.
Guy who started earlier. Okay. Your friend's going to have about, if he's saving $1,000 a month for 10 years and he's got 12% compounding interest, he's going to have about $230,000. Okay. But if you've been saving $100 a month over that same 40-year period, because remember, he waited 30 years to get started. Okay. Though he's putting in $1,000 a month with compounding interest in the way it works, that same $100 a month with 12% interest over 40 years, you're now going to have almost $1.2 million. I'm sorry, like we talked about earlier when we were talking about national debt and stuff, I can't comprehend what that kind of money that is. I'm sure there are people out there that can, Okay, I know there's people out there that can because there's sports people that make that kind of money every year. Not me. Not been there. Not going to be there. But that's the kind of money. But I'm teaching this, but the reality is I'm closer to the guy who didn't do it for 30 years. Now, I did always put some money away, but there were a bunch of years there where I had no money, no extra money to put away. Okay. And I was that guy who was in debt, far enough in debt that I had to dig myself out of that hole before I could start putting money away. Um, so there's a lot of different scenarios. There's a lot of different life circumstances that comes into play. But I want you guys to see just how important it is to establish the habit of saving for your retirement or for wealth accumulation, depending on how you want to look at it. How important it is to start saving early.
Yep. Yep. What I tell a lot of my clients, especially my younger clients, is saving $100 a month in your 20s is like saving $300 a month in your 30s, which is like saving close to $500 a month in your 40s, which could be north of $1,000 a month in your 50s to equate out to the same spot. So it takes a lot less dollars when you have more time to end to the same goal than if you wait later in life. Plus, it gives you the ability to be able to have the freedom to choose to do everything, to maybe retire when you're younger as well.
Cool. So, Victoria, do you have any questions on this subject when it comes to retirement?
Not really. Just
You're too young, and the thought of retirement hasn't even entered your brain yet, right?
Well, my husband's mostly been taking care of that kind of stuff. Like, I think he's in an S&P 500 right now. I can't remember.
Okay.
Which is great. I mean, most of my younger clients, that's what I say is just, a solid index play is as good as any. What I find too many times is people are trying to swing for the fences for penny stocks or things that are really unknown or not truly defined. And, so they're saving, they're putting money away, but, they're not putting it in stocks that become successful unless you just happen to find a diamond in the rough. And so, I mean, steady Eddie wins the race every time. So just, doing something that's proven, is the best route. So, and as you're young, the whole concept is when you're young, you have time. So you should be able to have the flexibility to put more risk on your money versus when we get older, and hint, David, we have to start really looking at how much risk we're putting on our money because if the markets were really to get bad, we can't afford to lose a substantial amount. Otherwise, we might end up having to work another 5 or 10 years to make back up for it. So the older we get, you want to start to shift your investment accounts to something that's a little more sustainable and it's not going to have quite as much risk on it. And so that's where somebody like myself comes in, is to try to analyze what kind of a risk are you taking and identify if that's appropriate or not.
So, like, as an example of that, when I was 35, the first advisor that I sat down with when I was about age 35, he asked me. He said, on a scale of 1 to 10, what's your risk tolerance? How much risk are you willing to tolerate in your money? And I said, on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm at about an 8. And he said, okay. And we set a plan and strategy to meet that risk tolerance. Now my risk tolerance is at about a 4. But that's because I'm older now. And like Dustin was saying, if the stock market went from the 34,000 that it is now down to 24,000, well, the portfolio that I have would shrink considerably in value, and it would take a number of years to earn that back. Now, what kills me is like, so today's Wednesday. We had a down day on Monday. We rebounded about $200 on Tuesday, and then we had another $600 or 600 points down today. So for the week right now, Dustin, if I'm not wrong, we're down almost 1,300, right, for the week?
Yeah, we're down probably around 2.5–3% for the week.
Okay. But I heard a news analyst dollars in 3 days. Well, the reality is he has not lost $14 billion. Yes, the value of the stock that he was holding might be worth less today than it was 2 days ago. But as long as he doesn't sell that stock, the reality is the chances are the stock market's going to come back, and a week and a half from now, he's going to be back to where he was on Monday. Am I saying that right, Dustin?
Yeah, I mean, you don't surrender until you actually sell the position, you know.
So you haven't lost the money until you actually sell it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it always amazes me when I hear these people throw out these stupid amounts of money that people have lost in a day. Well, no, as long as you don't sell that stock, you haven't lost anything.
Yep. Well, the value is going to go up and down every day. So.
And that's why Dustin tells me not to look at the stock, not to look at my stocks every day. I may watch what the stock market as a whole does, but don't look at your stocks every day, because it's going to go up and down. The reality is, where do you want to be in 10 years?
Yeah.
Am I right?
Yeah, or 20 or 30 or 40 years.
Well, in my case, I can tell you now it's 12 years for me.
There you go.
Because next week I turn 60.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I know. See all this gray? Next week I turn 60. But the reality is, my intent is to, as long as the Lord gives me the health to do so, I intend to continue working and not have to draw on those investments and stuff in order to maintain my lifestyle until I I think it's 72 when you have to start taking money out, isn't it?
That's correct. So
hopefully in about 12 years, I'll get, when I get lead time for what I expect, where I need to be and what I expect my money to be able to do for me in 10 to 12 years.
Yeah.
The money that I have invested, as far as I'm concerned, it's invested, and it's going to stay invested with the guidance of an advisor, but it's going to stay invested until such time as I need it in order to support my lifestyle. And hopefully, like I said, the Lord gives me good health and I'm able to continue working for another 10 to 12 years. Because like I said, I tried the retirement thing and it just didn't work for me. Okay. These guys that say they want to retire at age 45, I just don't get it. What do you do? Do you have any clients that have retired at 45, Dustin?
No, I think my youngest client's retired at probably 55, 60. But
so, and like I said, I'm fixing to turn 60, and I still can't imagine me not getting up and going to work.
Yeah,
it's a lifestyle.
I've had many clients that have gone back to work because they get bored.
Yeah, and that's what literally when before I met Dustin, I lived down in Houston. I moved to Kansas City. I was going to be a stay-at-home grandpa, and for a year and a half, that was great. Okay. But my son and daughter-in-law decided to put my grandson into daycare because they needed to get him exposed and around other children. And I was sitting at home twiddling my thumbs, and that didn't work. Victoria, you've been around me enough. You know I'm way too active for that, right? Okay, so I had to find something to do. So I went back to work, and I got a job that I didn't like. I mean, I hated the job. And Miss Gwen one night comes along and does that Jethro Gibbs slap in the back of the head, and she told me that I needed to find something so I could get back to doing what God gave me the gifts to do. And long story short, 6 weeks later, I was at Calvary University. And impart some knowledge and some wisdom. Hopefully, all these gray hairs that I have, I've earned. And there's some wisdom that comes along with that I'm able to impart to you guys. Dustin, did you have anything else that you wanted to add before we take a break and we cut you loose?
I think I think you've covered some really important parts. I think the biggest thing is, it's not that complicated if you can get, some professional help. And reality is professional help does not cost that much. So there's a lot of there's a lot of stigma out there that, gosh, if I don't have X number of dollars, I'm not going to be able to have an advisor help me. And so, but the problem is with that mindset is that, it's hard to get there. So I just really try to, when you get to the point of really trying to find an advisor that can help, try to make sure it's someone that, is trying to help everybody. And it doesn't have just the mindset of, you got to have X number of dollars or I'm not going to work with you. I've always, since I started my practice, and I'm right around 14 years in the business now. And, I told myself when I first got into the business that I promised myself I'd never get to the point where I wouldn't help anyone that needed help. And, I'm proud to say that that's still the case today. And, if you just, I work with millionaires, I work with clients that have less than $5,000, but you know what, everybody needs help. And, I feel like that's my calling, is to try to, use my knowledge to be able to help people achieve what they want. And we've, I've done that in many, many different avenues. I've transitioned, clients from 50,000 to 250,000 in my time, $500,000 to $1 million, just by, people working with me long enough. And that's not to say anything about me, but that's just the discipline of investing and keeping it invested and trusting the process. So I don't know.
One of the questions that I had, Dustin, and you were hitting on it somewhat there, but if you could be a little more specific.
Sure. How
do we as investors go about finding the right person to advise us?
Yeah, I think I can use it from the aspect of how I find clients, if that's a fair approach.
That'll work.
And so really, I would say the biggest trend for me when I first got into the business was it was a lot of cold calls. It was a lot of knocking on doors, hitting the pavement, just trying to grind. For every 5 no's, I might get a yes to just a commitment to have a conversation. But you fast forward, over the last 10 to 14 years, what has happened is for me, or what my experience has been, is that if as long as I do a good job to the people that I'm serving right now, then maybe someone is going to be willing to say something. Hey, maybe you should reach out to Dustin. He's really helped me with a lot of my needs. And so it's kind of a compounding effect where all of a sudden now you're getting some referrals from your existing clients. And now I work with grandparents, parents, and children, grown children as well. And so I think if you just do the right thing, you communicate, and you establish a level of trust, then people will be loyal to you too.
So you're saying you've got generational folks working with you, huh?
I have. Well, it took a long time to get there, though. Yeah. So, which is the best case scenario.
So not only for Victoria, but for please take into consideration.
You kind of cut out on me there.
Oh, sorry. Another one of those cutouts, huh? So those of you that, not just for Victoria, but for those that are watching on the video, um, uh, take into consideration the things that we've talked about here in this first hour, and sit down and kind of map out your goals, where you are today, where you want to be in 3 years, where you want to be in 5 years, where you want to be in 10 years, and then start to make positive moves towards reaching those goals. Most of you guys have had me in other classes, whether it be strategic management or case studies in leadership, and that's pretty much a consistent theme that I give you guys in all of the classes. Is the first thing you have to do is establish your goals, and then you need to make continuous positive steps moving towards those goals. And in many cases, when it comes to financial matters, we're not subject matter experts, but there are folks like Dustin out there that are. And my recommendation to you is that you find somebody that, like Dustin said, somebody that you can work with that you trust, and you use the advice that they give you and move forward.
And the other thing I'd probably say is it never hurts to interview more than one advisor, because a lot of advisors might have only kind of one cookie cutter way of how they want to steer all their clients. And so you can kind of get a feel for the industry if you can interview a couple before you make a decision on who you'd want to work with.
Victoria, did you have any other questions before we take a break?
No, I think you covered everything I would have a question about.
Good.
Okay. I appreciate the 7:05 now. Let's take a 10-minute break, come back about 7:15. You good with that? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a nice evening. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Okay. So, I hope that part was interesting and you guys enjoyed it. I try to when I, especially when I'm talking about areas that I'm not a subject matter expert in, much like this evening with investment, and then the last class that we had before Thanksgiving with the how to buy a home and all of that piece mess, if you will. I brought in Ms. Forte, and she talked to us about how to go about that process. Um, so hopefully those two guests coming in have helped. Okay. So let me see if I can get my PowerPoint presentation back up here. I didn't intend it to close, and it did. So give me half a second. I gotta get myself back on the right page here. So the part that I had listed that we, where we were going to pick up where we'd left off from the last time was talking about college and student debt. So we're going to try to pick up right there. I've got a few slides on this. Okay. Let's see. I guess I need to get the slides showing. Every time. You can see my slide, right? Okay. So, pull in some data for from recent studies. Okay, and by recent I mean this data comes from a study that was done in 2019. The most recent data that I could find. Okay, but it says that about 25% of all parents. And then I used the same wording that the survey did, but it's 25% of parents. And then for some reason they said 1 in 3 high school students. I don't know why they didn't just say 33% of high school students. Um, have no real understanding of what it costs to go to college. In many cases, that's because the parents are basing what they think it's going to cost to go to college off of what it cost them when they went to college. And as we all know from earlier in this class, costs have gone up. Well, cost of education has too. If that's not the issue, then and in that case, usually you'll find these parents, they'll think, well, it's going to cost about $5,000 a year to go to school. Well, in many cases, when they're thinking it's about $5,000 to go to school, that's because that may have been what it cost them to go to school, and where they were paying tuition and fees, but they were living at home. The reality is, in 2019, taking all of the schools that they had the data for, the average cost for 1 year of education was about $26,000. Now, what was involved in that $26,000? That was and they specified it. It was for your tuition, your fees, your books, and your board. You have that in order to attend class. That didn't cover any other expenses. Okay, it didn't cover any life expenses like buying clothes, putting gas in the car, having a social life. All those other, that was just what it took for you to sleep, eat, study, and go to class. So I would venture to say that in most cases, that $26,000 a year was probably closer to $35,000 a year when you consider the other expenses into what it costs the average student to go to school. Now, does it cost that much at Calvary? Well, probably not, because the tuition and fees are cheaper at Calvary than they are at most schools, as is evident by a bunch of different awards that Calvary has won or at least rankings to be in the top 10 or the top 5 of most affordable schools. But again, it depends on what you're calculating. Are you just calculating tuition and fees? If so, you know it's not nearly as expensive. Sorry, my eyeball itches, y'all. But if you're counting, a freshman that's doing room and board, it's more expensive. If you're married and living down in Philly Hall, now you've got life expenses on top. So it all adds up, doesn't it, Victoria? And that's the reason for a class like this, because so many folks that are y'all's age, just this is not the. Correct me if I'm wrong. Now, obviously, Victoria, you're the only one that I can talk to this evening. But did you guys get any of this kind of stuff when you were in high school?
No.
Yeah, that's what I thought. This type of education is not something that is generally taught in high school. Now, I will tell you that when I went to high school, a long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away. Fortunately, I had parents and grandparents that gave me some of this knowledge early. But the reality is, Miss Gwen and I, we were 19 when we got married. And a lot of the stuff that I have tried to, the wisdom that I've tried to share with you guys over the course of the last 6 weeks is life lessons learned in the University of Hard Knocks. Got myself into some financial trouble that I had to dig my way out of. Fortunately, and one of the things that, it kind of goes right along with not necessarily the college class, but the whole class of the whole theme of this evening, especially once you get married, and when I've done some marriage counseling with young ones that are thinking about getting married, one of the things that I always tell them is that you can't both be spenders. Somebody has to be a saver. Okay. Now it's great. You can both be savers, and that works. Okay. But you can't both be spenders, because if so, then you're going to run into problems. And what you have to do is both people in the relationship have to have at least a working knowledge of what the expenses are and how much is coming in and how much is going out. But the reality is there needs to be one person that is consistently the person who manages the money. And I can tell you that for Miss Gwen and I, especially after I joined the service. Now, we had been married, let's see, my son was 6 weeks old when I joined the service. So we had been married 3.5, almost 4 years. And I knew then, even before I joined the service, that Miss Gwen was going to be the one that was going to manage our money. I'm the kind of person that, is that light going to hit you? Anyway, I knew that, I'm the kind of person that, my grandfather taught me to save. And I would, when the money came in, the first thing that I would do is set money aside for tithe. And then I would set money aside for savings. And then whatever was left, I'd spend. I'd put it in my wallet and I'd spend. And when I ran out of money, I stopped buying stuff until the next time I got paid. Okay. That's just, that's just the way I was. Miss Gwen, on the other hand, she's the kind who would put the tithe away and put the savings away and would spend what we had to spend in order to pay the bills. And then she would take what was left, and instead of continuing to spend until it was gone, she put more money away. Okay. So I knew, but then once I joined the service, I was gone on a regular basis, for military exercises, and I wasn't there to pay the bills. So she took that on, and we've been married for 40 years, and I will tell you this. I have a general idea of how much money I owe, and I have a general idea of how much money I have in savings. She could tell you to the penny how much money I owe and how much money I have in savings. Okay. But you remember earlier I was talking about the fact that I don't do the accounting. I pay accountants to do that. Those people are weird. They belong behind a curtain, never to come out and see the light of day because they do things with money and numbers that's not supposed to be done. And I have proof of that because I married one of them. Okay, that's my spiel from my accounting class. The bottom line is people that do accounting, I love them to death, but I think they're weird. Okay. And I'm not an accountant. She does it for me. But then, now that I think about it, I've been married for 40 years and I don't think I've ever gotten a paycheck. I get an allowance, but I don't think I've ever gotten a paycheck. She's going to come in here in a minute and throw something at me. But the bottom line is this, if you're single, obviously you're going to have to manage your own money. If you're married, somebody in the relationship has to be the person who says, this is what we have, this is what we got coming in, this is what we got going out. Hopefully you got more coming in than you got going out. That's not always the case, and when that happens, you may not always be able to pay the bills on the same timeline or agreement that it was originally established, and you may have to negotiate with your creditors in order to pay them back a little bit less each time. But the bottom line is, when you get to the point where you got more coming in than you got going out, you have to consider, what are you going to do with that delta? What are you going to do with that money that's left over? And to begin to put it away, you don't have to put it all away. You can have fun. You can go to the movies. You can do whatever. But take what you had scheduled to put away and put it away. And then when you've got more left at the end of the month, you got more money left than you do month, then put a little bit extra away. And you will find that money will compound and it will make a difference in the long run. Okay. I know I'm probably preaching to the choir here. Actually, that's not true. I'm probably preaching to people that are like, huh? What do you mean? Ain't no way you're going to have more money at the end of the month than you got bills. We always got more bills than we got money. Okay? And college is your job, and that doesn't pay. In fact, you got to pay it. Okay? So, anyway, I need to shoot that rabbit and get back on track for my slides here. Okay. Understand that in a lot of colleges, so we were looking at about 25% of the folks that have no idea what college costs. Well, a lot of those is because they're looking at what it cost them when they went to college, and they're not taking into consideration the increase, the inflation that's happened. But in another case, a lot of times those people they're looking at colleges, and Calvary doesn't do this, but a lot of schools will. They'll advertise a price to be considerably higher than what it ultimately ends up being, because it's kind of like, Victoria, have you ever shopped at Kohl's? Okay, you like shopping at Kohl's, right? Have you ever noticed that when you go in there, everything's on sale? Or at least it seems like it? I used to do that with JCPenney's. It was like everything was on sale. Well, you know what? If everything's on sale, the reality is probably nothing's on sale. Okay? All they're doing is if they're saying that they're going to give it to you at 30% off, that's because they marked it up 50%. So they're giving you 30% off the 50% markup, so they're still making 22%. Okay? So, it's they're not really marking it down. They're selling it for what they can sell it for. Okay? And that's what colleges do. They'll some of the bigger named colleges anyway. They'll say it's going to cost you, let's just go back and say it does cost $26,000 a year. Well, they'll advertise that at $35,000 a year. But what we're going to do is we're going to give you a $10,000 a year scholarship. Well, that sounds real good. They're giving you a $10,000. That's just but ultimately, what you got to do when you're deciding which schools you're going to go to is you got to, and you guys are already at Calvary, so that's not a, but the reality is most of you are going to be parents at some point, and you're going to have children that are going to be looking at college. Now, hopefully that's a long time down the road, and it's not something that's going to be happening anytime soon for any of you. But the bottom line is it will come. And when that day comes, actually a long time before that day comes, you need to be preparing for it, okay? One of the things that we didn't talk about earlier when we were talking about investing is when you get to the point where you do have children, and if you have some of that extra money left at the end of the month, where you've got some money left, there's another investment engine, kind of like a 401k or an IRA. It's called a 529 educational investment. Now, in my case, I didn't have the money to do that. Well, they weren't around really when I was younger, because 529s are fairly new. But I didn't have the money to do that, to invest so that my kids could use that money to go to college. But I do have the money now, and I'm investing in 529 accounts so that my grandchildren will have the money to go to college. Okay. The nice thing about it is, for those of you that have done the FAFSA funds or forms and all of that stuff, when they're determining how much federal grant money you get, they take into consideration any money you make and any money your parents make, and they figure out how much money your family as a whole can contribute towards your education, and it's all a convoluted formula that they calculate out. One thing that they don't do is consider grandparents' money. So the money that I'm putting away in a 529 account for my granddaughters is money that when it's time for the draw money, just take that into consideration. And okay, that was the side note. Okay. You guys can look at these slides. I'll have the slides posted in Canvas, so you guys can look at these slides. Here's kind of what I wanted to get to. Okay, kind of ties back into all of the different stuff that we've been talking about with debt, and when you pay your debt, and when you save money and stuff. Okay, so federal loans are fairly low interest rate, but you got to make sure you understand which loans you're getting. Okay, are you getting a direct subsidized loan? Are you getting an unsubsidized loan? Are you at a graduate level? Obviously, none of you guys are at this point, but when you get to a graduate level, you notice the interest rate jumps up. It could be the same direct unsubsidized loan. It could be coming from the exact same lender that the undergraduate one did, but because it's graduate school, the interest rate jumps up. Okay, to me, I don't understand why that happens. Well, that's not true. I understand why it happens. I don't necessarily agree with it. I think the cost of money should be consistent. If you're using it for higher education, whether it's an undergrad loan or a graduate loan, to me, it's still education. Okay. I got what goes behind all of that as far as government calculations and stuff. Okay. And then if your parents are helping, where the parents are actually taking the school loan out, or if it's if you're looking for you can get direct plus loans, and again the interest is a little higher. But the thing you have to keep in mind is that long after you graduate, college loans can still be affecting your credit score. Okay, because you have a period of time while you're in school that you're not paying on those loans, or at least you don't have to pay. He didn't have one. take out a student loan, and then by the end of the semester, he would have that student loan paid off. He didn't need to take out the student loan. He could have paid for classes with his GI Bill and stuff, but he would take out the student loan and pay for the classes up front, and then he would get the GI Bill money and he would pay as much as he could on the student loans, and then he would take money out of savings and pay the rest on the student loans. But he did it where he took out a loan every semester, and then by the end of the semester, he had that loan paid off, okay? Which is great if you can do that, but in most cases, you can't. And in a lot of cases, not only are you drawing on that student loan for, to pay tuition and fees, but you're also drawing on that student loan in order to have money to live on. I got it. And most of you, while you're in school, you're not going to be paying on those student loans. And I think, unless it's changed, I think when you first graduate, you've got like 6 months before you have to start paying on them. Okay. But then you have to start paying on them, and you have to pay on them regularly. So the issue becomes, how long does it take you to pay them off? Okay. And do you pay them every month, like you're supposed to, and building that credit, or what happens is student loans for some reason, and this is something I don't understand. Student loans for some reason tend to be ones that if you can't pay all your bills, that's what ends up being, you let the student loans go with not getting paid. And the bottom line is it's still a bill, and it's still going to affect poorly on your credit. Okay, and granted, they can't come repossess your education, because that's up here. They can't come repossess your education like they could come repossess your house or repossess your car. But the reality is, it's still a bill that's got to get paid. Okay, so just keeping them in mind. For 10 years and still paying on student loans, because they went to a school that was that expensive, and they didn't have any kind of scholarships and stuff, and so they were spending lots of money going to school and getting their education. Now, most of them ended up finding good paying jobs and were able to pay it off, but I know a guy that's got a master's degree and is flipping burgers at McDonald's. It happens. Okay. So let me stop sharing this. And get to the teams. And Victoria's fixing to cringe, but we're going to watch Victoria's classroom presentation. Yes, we are.
Why don't we just not?
I told you she was going to cringe, didn't I?
Can I
come
leave
on.
for this?
I know it's here. I just was watching it yesterday. Oh, there it is. I found it. Ha. And the note that I got from her was, you don't have to show it all.
That's because it's 16 minutes long.
But it's good stuff.
No.
You put together a good one. Okay, let me see if I can get this sharing now.
All right, there. I think I have it right. Hopefully.
Victoria, can you hear it okay?
Okay, this is my first time using Teams in the conference. But anyway, learning from what happened to Penny Candy. I haven't ever read this book before. So it was really interesting. Now I gotta figure out how to get the slides to change. There we go. All right, so a lot of people do not understand economics or how money flows within one society. This causes a lot of blind fumbling around and just, other people taking advantage of it. Well, other people end up getting
you know, really messed up over their finances. I, for one, didn't know anything about it, and that's kind of why I took this class, because I didn't know a lot about money and how it really worked and how the government affected it, and I had no idea what inflation really was. And it's even more surprising because, you know, the book explains it, and there's already a lot of misconceptions about it. So that was pretty interesting to learn about. So one way that I thought would be the best points to touch on, and what was really interesting to me, would be like words that would definitely be on a test if we had tests in this class. And so things like tanstafal, I hope I'm saying that right, counterfeiting, clipping and debasing, inflation, depression, recession, and velocity. Oh man, I almost had that. Like all those kinds of things were super interesting to me, and I didn't know a lot about them. So first is tanstafal. There ain't no such thing as a free lunch. We really like things to be free, but they aren't. We either have to pay for them with actual money, our time, or labor. We're always paying for something somehow. And then I really thought of like some Bible connections to this in particularly, because so before the fall, we were already going to be working. Genesis 2, 8 and 9 say,
Presentation. Victoria, can you hear me?
put the man whom he had formed. And out of the garden, the Lord God made every tree grow that is pleasant to the sight and good for food. The tree of life was also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And then the Lord God took the man and put him in the garden of Eden to tend it and keep it. And the Lord God commanded the man, saying, of every tree of the garden you may freely eat, but of the tree of knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for in the day that you eat it you shall surely die. And the Lord said, it is not good that the man should be alone. So he made a helper. So we have the garden of Eden, and he's going to have to work in the garden of Eden, tend to it, keep it, take care of it. So he was going to be working even before the fall. Then things got real in Genesis 3 with the fall. Adam was still going to be taking care of and growing things, but now it was going to be very different. Then to Adam he said, because you have heeded the voice of your wife and have eaten from the tree of which I command you, saying, you shall not eat of it, cursed is the ground for your sake. In toil you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Both thorns and thistles it shall bring forth to you, and you shall eat the herb of the field. And the sweat of your face you shall eat bread, till you return to the ground, for out of it you were taken, for dust you are, and dust you shall return. So now working was going to be real rough, and we're going to have to do it for the rest of our lives. So, tanstafal, there's no such thing as a free lunch. We live in a world where everything can degrade if we don't take care of it. And then Proverbs 10, 4 and 5 say, lazy hands bring poverty, but hardworking hands lead to wealth. Whoever harvests during summer acts wisely, but the son who sleeps during harvest is disgraceful. So the Bible encourages and even though a lot of times we try to make it that way. So the government of Rome, as the book talks about, didn't like the fact that they had to pay for everything because they wanted to spend a lot of money. So they decided that after they couldn't tax any further without getting a total revolution going on their hands, they decided to start counterfeiting their money. And back then it was all coins of silver and gold and such. And so at first they start clipping the coins. So they just like scratch off a couple pieces of the ends of their coins, and then they melt them down and make new coins out of that. Well, eventually people started catching on, and they wouldn't accept the terrible coins because they weren't full coins, and they were getting just almost utterly destroyed by this. And so after the government couldn't do that anymore, instead of, just revising their plans or just finding a better way of doing things, they decided they're going to still continue to counterfeit. And so they did it a different way where they were going to debase the money. So they started taking the silver out of coins and adding less metals that weren't precious metals into them. And that way they could make more coins out of that. But eventually, over the years, when the silver coins were 95% silver, after several years, which like 60 years, I think was what the book said, it became like 0%. Like first it was 40, and then 15 years later, it was 0%. There was no more silver in the coins. And this created a problem with the circulation of the silver coins. People noticed that there wasn't as much silver in their coins, and they realized there's a lot more coins going around. But they weren't coins, they were tokens, because tokens are when they don't have any precious metal in them. And so people started keeping and hoarding up their silver, and they'd only use the tokens to spend money. And so that took all of the silver pretty much out. I don't know why I'm pointing. You can't see our figure. This is a little graph. That's the word. It's a graph of just the value of the dollar changing over the years, and how the dollar's ripped up because it's basically been debased itself. So then we have inflation. And so all the addition of money into the economy started building inflation. So 5 facts on inflation. The Federal Reserve defines inflation as the increase in the prices of goods and services over time. Penny Candy says it a little differently. It seems the government's trying to avoid a certain word here. Wow, I lost the page. All right. Inflation is an increase in the amount of money. Inflation increasing the supply of money causes the value of each unit of money to go down. So the Federal Reserve defines inflation as the increase in prices of goods and services over time, not mentioning that they're rising because they keep adding more money into the economy and changing the velocity and the circulation of money. People think they have a lot more money. Businesses are going to raise prices because people are buying a lot of things. So the supply and demand starts.
Okay, I'll stop it at that point, because that did go a little over the 8-minute mark there. And no, Victoria, trust me, you did an excellent presentation. Okay, I just don't want you to feel like you're being singled out. Okay, excellent presentation, and I did catch the humor in that last part there, where the government doesn't bother telling you that the reason it's inflating is the reason the prices are going up is because they're putting too much money in there. So I appreciated that. Okay, so now let me see if I can get to Emily's. If I'm not mistaken. So Emily and Alexis decided to do theirs instead of doing a single video. Let me pause that for half a second. Okay, so they decided instead of doing a single video where they were just simply talking to the camera, they did a Teams meeting between the two of them. So they did have somebody to talk to. And if any of the rest of you want to do that in the future, that's fine. Even if you want to just, if you want to have a set a time with me for the next one to do it, that would be fine too. Okay. So I'm going to show theirs, and we'll get this moving here.
Yeah. You ready?
Okay, cool. I did too.
Okay.
Yep, go for it.
Oh, wait. Maybe one of us just had to do it because I think it's recording now.
Okay, well, I did.
Okay. Okay. So we decided that we wanted to do our projects together so we could interact throughout our presentations, since we can't be in class, obviously, and we both can't be online class. So here's my presentation on whatever happened to penny candy. My name's Emily, by the way, if we're showing this to the class. I am on campus, but I take all my classes online, and so I'm in my dorm room currently. This is the book that we read. So I really liked this book because it was very practical. I really liked how the format was a letter. I really was thankful that it was very easy to understand and that I didn't have to try to figure out what all this meant. I could just read it and they assumed I didn't know anything, which I needed. So I'm very thankful we had that. Then, so inflation. So inflation is very sensitive. As you can see on this picture on my presentation, it shows how the price of a cup of coffee has gone up. I chose this one because I love coffee, and so this is very relevant to me. This is just like a plain black cup of coffee. Compared to a latte. Latte would probably be about triple of what the 2019 coffee costs. And so inflation is really sensitive. It is touchy by anything that happens in the nation. One of the concepts from economics was this that I did not understand. I understood inflation occurred when there was more money, but I didn't understand exactly how that was impacted, and I didn't know how. I just knew sometimes with politics it was different. So this was really interesting to me to learn about. Concept I gathered from it was that the value of the dollar is ultimately lower once more money is put in the nation's economics. So, and I have my phone up because it's my notes. So, the supply and demand. So, ultimately, if something is widely available, it's not going to be very expensive. But if it's really expensive to buy, the demand for it won't be as high because many people won't be able to pay for it. Really cheap compared to most fast food restaurants. So, for instance, a hash brown is $1, but if you were to go to McDonald's in a different country where there's only like a few per town, it might be $3. I don't know for a fact that those are the numbers, but I know that I went to Sweden about 5 years ago, and that it was more expensive there to buy a McDonald's meal than it was to buy McDonald's here. So another thing with supply and demand that is just real world right now, which I kind of thought of as I was reading the book, was COVID really impacted our supply and demand. You used to be able to get PPE, protective personal equipment, masks and gloves. You could order them and get them really quick, but now it's really hard to get that. And we're even seeing that at my job. I work at the UPS store, and it's ridiculous that it's impacted by that. But ink and like anything for a printer is on back order right now. Or I can't guarantee a shipment because of COVID still. And I haven't been able to guarantee that since the beginning of 2020. So I think that's really interesting that the demand of that is being impacted by COVID. COVID just throws a whole different ballgame in anything. So one of my favorite words that I learned, there ain't no such thing as a free lunch. So I really thought this was funny. It was one of my favorite parts of the book. It made me laugh. And I really thought it was interesting concept, and it's very true, obviously, that there's no fact, I mean, you get free government taxes for that. So it's ultimately goes around full circle. It kind of like education. We have free public education, which is wonderful, but we do pay money for that in our taxes. This actually began in the Roman Empire. So whenever the Romans began the welfare programs, kind of like we have, they had to pay taxes. So this is something that a lot of different politicians try to talk about, like whether or not they should have to pay for it or not. Like welfare programs, such as Obamacare, is one example of free medical insurance. It's not actually free. We're people that are paying taxes are paying for that. And this was a large problem. This goes back to COVID, is that unemployment became very big during 2020. So everyone was getting paid to stay home by the unemployment because they increased it because they wanted people to not get sick. And so then they had to ultimately find that money somewhere. So the taxes become where it comes from. Unfortunately, we just have to keep on doing that, which it's free money until we pay it back. So ultimately, we got paid so many $1,000s per person or family, but we didn't get a free lunch out of that. Okay, so on to politics. I kind of talked a little bit about politics earlier, but politics are very influential to economics. That's why it's so important when we do vote that we vote for someone who we like their takes on economics, like taxes. I would rather vote for someone who's not going to tax me. If you've seen Hamilton, that's also where that comes from. So one good example of the politics and economics that anyone will see if you own a car is gas. So gas and prices have doubled since COVID began. So I remember filling up my car in like May of 2020, and it was close to $1.50 per gallon, which was amazing. If you've looked at the gas prices, it's $3 right now here. I know, Dave, you're not here, but that would be what it would be. So that was really interesting that, since Biden came into office, that has doubled. So something that he's doing is ultimately impacting that. Or it might just be COVID. But in the end of the day, he's kind of running the country, so it's kind of making the gas prices kind of go up. That's my personal belief, but I believe that's fairly accurate. Lexi, do you agree? Am I right on that concept? Okay.
Yep.
Okay. The next concept is a business cycle. So business cycles are when it goes through recessions. So it goes up and down. So recession, it goes down, and we don't have like. I'm sorry, I don't. Oh, so like the recessions, prices are inflated, and then as we go back down, they go back to somewhat normal economy, and then it goes back. So we're kind of just in this limbo of going back and forth. That's kind of the concept that I gathered from it. Like, Great Depression is one of the biggest, and that's when prices were rather low. But one other way was COVID really impacted the economy. Kind of like with gas, it lowered our gas prices, but then they've gone back up, which also caused people to lose their jobs, which is also another side effect of having recessions because there's not enough money to pay people. So that would be the other one. And then, okay, this is one of my favorite parts, currency. So currency is money. Everyone likes money. Obviously, we shouldn't idolize money. We know that because we know the Bible. So currency has changed throughout time. So it used to be kind of like gold or different coins. But as we've developed as people since that time, we have in the United States, we have $100 bills, 50s, 20s, and 10s, and 5s and 1s. And then we have pennies, nickels, dimes, and quarters. So something that also has changed since then is, so it's gone from just coins because we've inflated our prices to need more cash, like dollars. And then now we've gotten to the card. So one of my points on my paper actually, which was the information age. So since we now have been able to receive communication quicker, I kind of wanted to compare the two. Communication, whenever you can communicate quicker, we also can now pay very quick. So what you could do, really, what took a long time to get to, now is very easy. So that was something I thought was interesting, kind of thought to note. And then, so this is the gold coins. So I thought was they talked about in the paper about how they would break coins in half to pay a full coin if it wasn't a full coin. And then ultimately that led to no value to that coin. So I thought that was kind of cool, even though it was gold, which is very valuable no matter what, and it's still valuable today. Some people actually just invest in gold, which I think is kind of interesting. And then also due to like fluctuation in the value of money, gold and silver are also good ways to like invest in money. So I thought that was kind of cool. That you could do that and have that in the back of your pocket, like in case of an emergency. And then also like having Roth IRAs and IRAs is another way to save money and like see the fluctuation. So like I have a Roth IRA which builds every year because it is getting interest. Okay, my last slide is about debt. So something I learned a lot about this class in this book was how the government gets in debt, which still is really hard for me to grasp my mind around. But the government goes into debt because they just print money, and then they just keep on having debt, and the cycle of debt continues. So I think it's kind of interesting that even though they're printing more, that we as civilians we have to pay taxes on that. So I thought that was interesting. I really enjoyed this book so far, and I'm looking forward to the next one. And I really like that this is really advantageous for anyone and for family finance. So that's it for me, Lexi.
Okay, and I'm going to stop there as you're watching this video. Please understand that I'm not cutting you off, but your video was a transmission issue, meaning you were freezing up as much or more than you were alive. I was able to get what I needed out of the parts that played well. So and you've already gotten your grade and stuff on it. So, but I just for the purposes of showing it for the class, because there's so much freeze time on it, I've just opted not to show that one. And I apologize because all you guys, she had some very good points to make. We're going to call it a night at this point. what I would like to do is encourage you guys. I have really enjoyed reading your papers and the comments that you guys have made in the papers, both on for the Penny Candy book and for the Your Money Counts book. A number of you have made comments that you've really enjoyed reading both books, and you've learned things in this class that that you hadn't expected to. What I would encourage you to do is at the end of the course, when you do your SRIs, you know how they ask you those questions at the end of the course, rather than just simply answering, you know, the little, you know, the little dots, please make comments on the SRI. Because that's the kind of stuff that Dr. Bittner and Dr. Washington are going to see and make determinations as to whether we're going to use, you know, present this class again. So if you guys have enjoyed this class, and I know we still got a couple more weeks, don't get me wrong, but I'm thinking about it now, so I want to say it now. If you guys have enjoyed this class and you've enjoyed the material and the textbooks that you're reading, if you're learning from them in ways that you didn't expect to, please make comments about that on the SRI so that Dr. Bittner and Dr. Washington sees that. And whether I'm teaching it again or whether, you know, maybe Dr. Washington or somebody else is teaching it, your comments will have a lot to do with whether this same textbook materials get used again the next time this class is taught. So please get your feedback, because it does make a difference. You guys may think that nobody reads those things, and I can assure you that that's not the case, because for every class that I teach, when you guys get done doing the SRIs, now, like you guys will do them in the middle of December, and I won't see the stuff until February, but I'll get all of the responses. Again, I'm not going to know who did what because there's no names on it, but I'll get all of the responses, and we'll be able to see, you know, in a conglomeration, you know, what was said about the different categories in that SRI. Okay, so again, while I'm thinking about it, I wanted to mention it. And so please, if they're good comments, obviously I want to hear good comments. But the reality is, if there's bad comments, I want to hear those too. Because the bottom line is if there's something broken in the way I'm presenting the material, well, I can't fix it if I don't know it's broken. Okay, kind of that same mantra that I've used in a few other classes. You know, when you're talking about management, we as managers can't fix things if we don't know it's broken. So we want our customers, and in this case, you guys are my customers. We want our customers to let us know when something's not right. Okay, and if something is right, we want to know that too, because we want to be able to enhance and keep the things that are right going as well. All right. So again, Alexi, sorry about not showing your video. But like I said, you froze up enough that I just, for the purposes of showing it for the class, I just don't think it'll work. I did get out of it enough for what I needed to be able to give you the grade. You guys remember, I think I've got everybody's paper, but I guess as of tonight, or I think maybe it's still set for tomorrow night, since I initially set the class up thinking it was on Thursdays. But so for tomorrow night, you guys have the videos for the second book that are due. Let's get that in, and we'll continue with some lecture stuff on Thursday of next week, and then we'll watch the videos next week for the second book, and we'll move to what we're going to do for that last week. Have a good night, Victoria. Thank you for being here. I thought Dustin and I were going to end up having a conversation just between the two of us there for a little while. So, and I understand sometimes you get home a little late and you get on, just get on whenever you can. Okay. But next week we will continue on. Again, I got a few more slides to hit on, a few more subjects. And next week we'll probably hit 2 or 3 subjects, so we won't go quite as in depth on any one subject. But there's going to be kind of those, you know, hit and move type subjects next week, because I want to cover 2 or 3 more subjects. And then we'll get into watching some. We may watch a couple of videos first and then do some lecture and come back and watch some more videos. I'm not sure exactly how I'm going to set it up yet, but we will see you guys next week. Have a good week. Stay safe. And understand it's coming into the end of the semester. You guys are all doing great as far as being caught up and getting the work in for this class. I know that you have other classes that you're doing. So please don't let the don't let the procrastination on classes begin to snowball, because this is the time in the cycle when it happens. Okay, trust me, I've been there. It wasn't that long ago I was sitting in the student seat. So, all right, you guys have a good night.
Bye.